What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome. I am Mr. No Show,
And I'm 72 the architect.
and today we're going to have a great show for each and every one of you.
And today we're going to be talking about controlling factors.
Oh, dang. Is that right? Control factors.
Yeah, who's pulling the strings, my friend? How you live, how you roll,
Hmm,
who's in it?
that's deep.
We got to
And it's
think
like,
about that. It's very,
and
very
also
important,
who's supplying the strings to the puppet master.
right? Is it our will or theirs?
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. So, what will you be reading today, man?
Well, today I kind of found it interesting to read a dose of the Daily Stoic, and this is from Ryan Holiday's book, The Daily Stoic 366 Meditations on Wisdom, Perseverance, and the Art of Living. Also co written by Stephen Hanselman. On page 114 for April 12th, it says, Reject tantalizing gifts. Now, it goes on to say that Atreus, quoted from Seneca's Thyestes on 536, he says, who would reject the flood of fortune's gifts? Theaetetus says, anyone who can experience how easy they flow back. Now, Ryan goes on to describe that Stoic quote, and he refers to it. He says, Thyestes is one of the Seneca's darkest and most disturbing plays. Even 2,000 years ago, later it remains a classic of revenge genre. Without spoiling it, the quote above comes from the scene in which Atreus is attempting to lure his hatred brother, Thyestes, into a cruel trap by offering him tempting and generous gifts. At first, Thyestes declines to complete in bafflement of his enemy. We are typically surprised when someone turns down expensive gifts or position of honor or success. Now, General William T. Sherman emphatically rejects offers to run for the president of the United States, saying at one point, I will not accept or if nominated and nor serve if elected. If his friend Ulysses S. Grant had made such a Sherman esque statement as such as rejection are now known, great certainty would have been preserved for his own legacy from this disastrous turn of events it suffered. But despite his initial misgivings, Thyestes is ultimately tempted and persuaded to accept fortune's gifts, which turned out to be a ruse hiding a devastating tragedy. Not every opportunity is fraught with dangers, but the play was intended to remind us that our attraction toward what is new and shiny can lead us into serious trouble. So, the question of today is what's the truth about the so called honors and riches? So, it's a deep question. I think it's very appropriate today. A lot of us do speak on what we want, but if we look at what we want versus what we work with, it determines our personal value, don't you think? I see you, Mr. No Show.
What we want versus what we work with. Yeah, most definitely. It determines. It really does determine that, man.
All right.
Um,
Yeah. So
yeah,
anyhow,
it really does make a difference, man. Can you hear me?
so I can hear you now.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, you're good.
So, long story, yeah, I agree. It does take a lot to deal with just those two. Um, there's a lot of things to look into as far as how we mix ourselves into society. There's a lot of ways that we need to look into how we understand personal perspectives. But the key thing about what you just read is how we look into what is within our grasp, what can we control and what we cannot control. And I feel that is one of the key elements a lot of us deal with, knowing what we do as parents, what we do as workers or self-employed, and learning to take the actual helms into our hands and be able to take the cruise of the ship, right, and be able to be the captain of our own selves. So one of the things is, where do we stand with the controls And who's the ultimate controller throughout this world we live in? Is it your employer? Is it the technical advances? Is it if you just willfully give up like food?
Well, food to
Or
me, like
is
that's the
it
important most that's one of the most important parts of of where you're if you starve someone, let's just use
yeah,
food as an example. If you starve someone, they will do anything by any means to get fed. There are many people that I mean, if you look at certain thought leaders and movement leaders, like you look at Gandhi, Cesar Chavez, they went through a hunger strike, to protest against the crimes against the cultures and humanities. And they managed to get to the brink of like they were dying. Like you could see these people, and you look back in history, um, you can see that these people were willing to go to death, but who all is equipped for that kind of internal strength? Not everybody, but you get people starving or thirsty, you can watch how easy they can become
right.
followers and submit. So food is a very, very important factor, you know. I mean, without good food, can you think adequately? Are you persuaded? No show. Are you persuaded if you don't have a good level of nutrition?
On the type of persuasion, life or death, most
Hmm.
definitely. This is hard. I'm eating. I just take a normal day or all of that, knowing that it could literally be your last meal, or you don't have enough finances to get you feel that you want. You urge to eat, but when you really break it down, this thing is coming up for me. And once you realize how much you can just off and not let
Okay, so no show your signal's coming in really it's glitchy. So I know you it's like the signal. So ladies and gentlemen, forgive us for a little bit of technical difficulties. It's just the internet signal at this time. So what no show is really trying to get at is by determining your level of attention is also determined by a couple of factors. You look at food, you look at sleep, you look at your engagement. These mental and physical factors play in your ability to be able to contribute to things or not. It also determines what you will follow and what you will not follow. People that have excellent nutrition, excellent exercise, excellent sleep are on a tendency to actually want to being and working with being successful. But if you start leveraging any of those mechanisms, what ends up happening in the long run is that you start to work from a deficit. You start working from a lower energy perspective. You definitely cannot make a difference without having those three critical factors, necessity, so to speak, without being a good human being. Now, some people can live self sufficient, some people can live. But eventually you're going to be communal. You're going to want to work with other people and understand that how far that goes. Now we work with companies, and sometimes they're incorporated, corporations. Sometimes we are self-sufficient. We're business owners. Sometimes we're just employees for a small business. Whatever it may be, one thing I can definitely tell you is that if you are not aware of what actually controls you and actually how your strings are pulled, what can you really say authentically in the best position possible of, am I making the best decision for myself and am I making the best decision for my family? So when we look at these things, ask yourself simply, all right, am I making the right choice for me or making the right choice that I only have options for? you know if I can't say, like, if I lived in California, what kind of jobs do I qualify for? you know um and with that being said, if you're only looking at what you qualify for, um that's a big thing. Like, we go to school, for example, and we look at what kind of, like, I was just listening onto a TikTok, and an educator for Stanford, or an admissions agent for Stanford University, basically said it's not about the major that you're really wanting to explore. It's the major that you're going to use to work in the industry. So, say, like, if you're going in for liberal studies, so to speak, and you look at what's going on with liberal studies. What is the demographic of you having? What kind of earning potential do you have? Um, if you don't have an education, what are your possibilities in working in manual labor, whether you're being a contractor, working roofing, being an electrician, a plumber, which requires you to go through some kind of trade training. So they have trade schools out there, but are those trade schools, you know, they're labor intensive. A lot of people have steered away from, I don't want to do labor. I'd rather do something intellectual. So when we look at, what intellectual factors that play into, can I earn more by speaking and writing? Possible. Now, can I earn more by being, say, like an electrician or plumber? Possible. You can start your own company. And in certain parts of the country, like, for example, if you go to work in San Francisco and you work in one of the trade unions, which San Francisco is a union city pretty much, in my opinion, what they do is, to get into the union, you got to apply, you got to take a test, they do an evaluation, they look and they vet you out, and you get into maybe an apprenticeship program. Regardless of how much experience you've had, you still got to work with them, which the way they conduct business. So when we look at control factors, we look at, food. If I can't have food, then I don't, I'm going to compromise my value system. The next thing is that really affects the human spirit is, if I don't have adequate sleep, I'm a walking zombie. I make irrational decisions. I will do anything by leveraging these natural human factors that are on us. If we don't get sleep, we don't get food, you know, if we don't have engagement, mental stimulation, we tend to suffer more than what we would like. And when we look at how we not just internally suffer, but also who depends on us. I'm a father, I'm a dad. I've got two girls that I got to be essentially responsible for. When I look at how I'm responsible, how I fund them, or when they're in my care, or when I'm with my significant other, my lady, how we work together to make that family exist is by the necessities. What is the primary point of necessities? If I don't help fund my child, I look like a loser. That's socially. But if she has no resources and me not funding, how does my kid eat? Where does the money come from? These are the leverages. So when you're exchanging your time for a lot of different things, you exchange your time, your expertise, or your ability. And we've kind of talked about this on Blank Canvas, and Mr. No Show is on a temporary, momentary technical break. So bear with us. He'll be right back. I promise you. Anyhow, so when we look at these leverages and we look at how people engage with each other, people will go and disparage how they, what they're bringing into the game, like their community, and people will subcategorize it down. Well, it could be your culture, it could be your language culture, it could be, there is a thing called color coding. People identify according to color. People identify by speaking a language. People
Right.
identify by working class. Look, you live in a certain
Yep.
neighborhood. you know you back, Mr. No Show?
Yeah, man. Everything should be all good, right?
Yeah, you sound good, look good.
We look good up here, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry for the technical difficulties. What did I miss, man?
I
What
was
did I
just
miss?
I was basically going over the necessities of food, sleep, shelter, and engagement with each other, human activity. We need to cohabitate, for our thriving. We need, not just, food and sleep and shelter are important, but the how we exchange our time, our energy with what we do, why we do, from, how valuable you are or not.
Mm,
The rich don't get rich unless they have a labor force,
mm.
unless they can sell something or someone buys into their idea and mindset. So that's where I'm at.
Okay, so kind of almost where we were talking about the self-sustaining method. Can people handle themselves? And let's say, I think I was talking about dealing with the food before I got cut off.
Mhm.
Um, how a lot of people can manage their lives without the daily intake of any kind of food, where fasting comes into place. They cut that feeling immediately off. They're able to start building this separation from it. Now, could
Mhm.
we fast from the majority of things that we have here today in our lives? Could we use a different form of fasting from, whether it be, dealing with the mundaneness of going to work? Would it be the stresses of being a father, a husband? Could it also be the stresses of having to deal with the crazy market as a personal business owner? Just these things where it just encompasses us. We just waited. We're feeling the change of society, and the winds are feeling good, but there's certain things that just shift us just a little bit off our course. Now, people rely on food more so in times of stress,
Mhm.
times of anxiety. People get lack of sleep doing these same things. So it's almost as if it's a functioning tree system with the roots. It all plays with the limbs of the branch and how the apple falls, all that jargon. But the main
Mhm.
point is, today, are we looking at these factors and associating our thinking process to it?
Right. And one of the interesting things that we were kind of talking about off air is as I was talking to younger people from across the globe, in North Africa, they're literally telling me they really it's almost impossible for them to live without their technical device, their cell phone. And I'm like, "Are you sure about that?" And I asked carefully crafted questions, and their response was, "Without me being able to clock into my job or see traffic or see what's available in the markets. If I don't do that, I don't thrive or survive." But I asked him carefully questions. Can you turn off your phone for an hour? It's very difficult. It's hard, is what they say. And I asked it, and just to see their mindset. But how does that also translate here in the U.S. or Mexico or even Canada? The same. We are seeing the younger generations being molded into being dependents on their device. Even we ourselves, we communicate through a device of some sort, either desktop or cell phone. You know, would we have met each other without these things? The likelihood, maybe not. What we have connected
I
on.
don't know. I don't know. Let's say, for instance, if technology wasn't as far accomplished as it is today, we would look
Mhm.
into. I probably would have met you at some kind of event, right? Maybe,
That is a strong possibility. We
right,
can't ignore that
and
because
then
we have
also
like minds. Yeah.
we end up finding people who naturally, like you said, think like us or act like us, or there's certain art pieces that draw each other in. There may have been an art exhibit that we found out in our daily newspaper that
Hmm.
was going on. Like, you just never know these things, but the dependency is strange enough because of how it gravitates to your emotions and to your well-being. Now, I don't live on planet Earth as much as everybody else may have, but I know for a fact that when I'm up on the moon, I'm in my own world. I'm bouncing around. I'm not weighted down. I have chances to see what is beneath me. That you know, but I don't think a lot of people get the gravitational aspect within their lives. So when I look at these computer gadgets, the PlayStation, the Xbox, the Switch, the MIDI keyboards, the drums. A part of this stuff, I know I wouldn't want to leave, but I have to, right? Because if
Mhm.
all these things are pieces of me, and like multiplicity, like there's so many pieces of me in a home. Like there's something in the living room that's a piece of me. There's something in the kitchen that's a piece of me. And when I have all these pieces of me scattered out, divided amongst one entity like myself, I have to ask myself, is like, wait a minute, I'm already living without, but my reliance on it solely depends on what I prefer or how I want to live with that. And I think a lot of the young minds are living on this mindset because we grew up may have been different from your parents and their parents growing up. They weren't reliant on technology. They were more reliant on horses and using actual elemental experiences
Mhm.
firsthand. You know, we have now people doing it for us where we can just buy and buy and buy. It took the processes of us actually communicating, creating personal trade, creating that bridge between entrepreneur or business mind and and market. Now it's like one controlled market instead it's a free market. No, I don't know. Hopefully it's a free market. But
But
that goes.
and that's the interesting thing. We are not in an isolated regional commerce now where a lot of things we get are from other countries and not just our own. And the percentage of that trade that comes into the US deeply affects about how we live, what we earn, what job you can get. If you are looking at the whole totality of the world. Some countries in this world refuse to commit fully to global trade because they understand the implications of taking out their labor force within their own country, which devalues their earn internal marketing system. You know, if they don't have anything that backs their own money by their own efforts, then what do you have? We have, I mean, look at like cryptocurrency. We literally watched banks now switch the mindset of like we can't quiet this down, so we have to buy all in because people are leaving us. If they're not storing their money with us, they're storing it somewhere else, and that leaves us not having lending power, not having monopolies to buy and keep and hold land to the value.
Mm.
It affects fuel costs, it affects beliefs.
A lot of beliefs. I mean,
Yeah.
let's take for instance, I don't want to sit here and put my money in the bank, right? Let's take that person who feels that way. Do they themselves tell more of their friends and family to join a board and become connected in this non-centralized atmosphere? Could you be willing to make that switch because you're so used to giving the banks control? Now they see that the control is leaving their pockets, they automatically want to go ahead and grab them a centralized cryptocurrency. Only that point we see the true power is in the free market, and if we can control the development of how that market is pushed, I mean, yo, there's no say in what the central banks are going to do. They're going to be bound back down to our will. Watch their interest rates drop and plummet, skyrocket down to the dirt. You know, watch all that
Well,
go
it's
down.
interesting you say that because if you last week I was reading an article in Spain where people were outraged about the energy shortages that they're having. Most Americans don't know what's going on in Europe right now. They literally are fighting for a fuel source. It's a community fuel ration. So what happened in Spain, what I was reading was there was this guy who put out this mass media campaign says, "Hey, everyone shut off all your power for literally like I think it was like I don't know if it's 4 hours or for half a day." And the energy companies came back just by losing that many millions or maybe $1 billion in revenue that the people in that small country, Spain is not a it's a semi big country, but it was big enough to where they can control the narrative saying, "Look, you're going to keep charging us. We're going to shut off and guess what? We will learn to live without your supply or your monopoly." And so the government officials, they had to start negotiating with the utility companies because if gas is out of like I'm just now noticing here in California, up until 2 days ago, gas on average was 5.50 and above. Only in certain areas, like in Modesto, California, the cheapest gas I found was $5.09. Now, on an average, it's I think 5.12, like in Stockton where I live, and you go to other communities, same thing. But you go to the Bay Area, it's close to $6 in many areas. And people are pissed. And now because people are remotely working, they're like, well, you know what? If you're really going to make it so expensive where I can't live, I'm not going to drive. And if I can't drive, guess what? No one's buying cars.
But that's a trickle down effect to people not
Yeah.
buying cars, people who working on lube mechanics, working in the garage. That affects even the smallest person who works on it, unless they had in hindsight to see these new futuristic cars come into play. They up their tech game and they become more of a tech savvy mindset. But even then, the grid, if they have control of the current grid now, that puts a lot of people and families in situations where, man, I'm gonna have to charge you extra to fix the brakes that I used to charge you, man. And that's not even going to a shop. So could that be the shops are getting paid? The people that work in the shops are getting paid more, but working less, and that means they're going to lose business. Does that mean the smaller businessman has to raise his personal price to handle the influx of driving to point A to point B to take care of your ride? So all these trickle down to the smaller person, and if that does happen or will happen, what happens to the change and the switch in the brain? You know, the banks versus the people. Can we walk away? Will they follow?
Well,
And
here's what you're
once,
noticing now is a lot of banks are going under. They're closing their branches. I mean, how many branches were closed for Bank of America alone during
yeah,
COVID?
mm,
We started seeing less ATMs. People don't need ATMs and cash. Why? This really changes things when you can't exchange paper and paper doesn't have a backing.
mm,
What next? You have a digital. So here how it even gets more sinister. So we look at the cost exchange of living. So say like our vehicles, it's being encouraged to go all electric. But here's something interesting that I was watching on TikTok, and a guy posed a really important question who's a mechanic. He said, and I think I sent you the TikTok video. He basically said alternators are meant to recharge a battery, right? So let's say electric vehicles run on batteries. By the spinning of the wheel, the alternator creates a charge. Why not put all, and the guy said, why not put alternators on all four wheels? As they're spinning, they recharge itself. He also pointed out that, whether it be Rivian, Tesla, any of the automakers, why don't they do that? Exactly. Because if they don't create a revenue stream by, a charge station or charging our house charging our vehicles, that creates or cuts off the monopoly where the revenue stream is cut, investments are cut, the holdings of the monopolies in people's lives and what they live with really sends shockwaves. So that means that people can autonomously decide and cut the financial structure that has been in place for 200 years that leverages on our daily living, which affects your shelter. If you don't have to keep paying for a car, say like you got an electric car, right? It doesn't have very many mechanical parts like an engine does. You don't have alternators or you don't have timing belts. You don't have oil changes. You don't have transmissions to replace as easy. You
mm,
know,
yeah,
why? And then the guy made another point. He's like, what we could do with solar panels alone on top of vehicles, hoods and overheads, you know,
and
what we could
that's the power. That's the
yeah,
power.
that's a
Mm,
controlling factor. Transportation feeds so much more. Without transportation, our food doesn't we can't get food. And by, look at the explosion of what happened to Uber Eats, DoorDash, um, Postmates. What's the shopping app, the big one? I forget what it's called where they go
yeah,
grocery
I don't
shopping
use
for
that.
you.
I don't use that.
But
I
these
don't
are
know what it is,
point
but yeah, yeah, I
but
got
but
you.
the point is that we give up the convenience for the responsibility options. So if I can not have to go to the store, not have to engage or
Oh man, so the
y-
convenience is ruining us. Our convenience is ruining us. Our convenience is that is all it is, right? Are we too?
allegedly.
Is everything being too convenient for us, right? I
Right.
mean, how do we
Where
get it comfortable?
yeah, where
Go
do
ahead.
we take personal responsibility and looking at some things? manually are needed. For example, I was talking to some young people the other day, and they were saying how difficult it is to live their lives without their devices. They don't even know how to talk to each other without being on an app or showing some kind of digital presence. Like I asked her, so how hard would it be for you to start? Say, like I was talking to a young guy, a good friend of mine, and I asked him, I said, so how hard would it be for you just to go and approach a woman? Well, I don't. It's very hard because they already prejudge me, and I'm like, is that your assumption, your illusion? He's all, no. They don't easily accept because if a man approaches a woman, allegedly, he is considered a possibly an attacker when he could just be saying hello, but because
Mm.
society kind of adopted a certain level of engagement as possibly dangerous, even just smiling or saying hello could be considered a social attack. If you think I'm lying,
No, it's amazing that it's that's the case. 'Cause I heard somebody say similar situations where they get called a simp if you just approach a girl and you try to talk to her. Like now he's a simp because he wants to holler at the girl. Like,
right?
is there something wrong with the way we perceive people nowadays? Is there something wrong with the way we control our very own reality? Because I feel like a lot of the things that happened are people who are lashing out against the comfort zones they already are sitting in. Like for instance, I will be happily miserable knowing that I don't want to leave my home because COVID's in effect and I can't go anywhere because I have to have a mask. So I'm just gonna stay here. And you got apps now that have people go grocery shopping for them. Like what? No, it's the convenience is killing us, and it's leading us in the wrong way. So for the younger generation and their points of views, I mean, a lot of the kids, I don't think if they're given a tablet an hour a day, right, would ruin them. I think if you leave them in front of it for the whole day, constantly, weeks on weeks,
But
you're building that mindset.
now, we've pointed out this point before in other shows by parents alleviating their responsibility and attention on their child to
Mm,
give them a tablet to be that metaphorical babysitter. But what really happens is it has now become their master, so to speak,
mm.
because I've watched my own 4 year old and even my 14-year old develop certain stigmas in their minds by constantly on a screen and not engaged. My 4 year old loves playing with other kids, so this is me observing, and you and I grew up in a generation where we went outside, played baseball, played football, played basketball. We were out in the neighborhood. It's okay. But
Right.
parents have now adopted this fear mindset where it's like, well, if I can't be outside watching my child might be kidnapped by a sex offender or pedophilia.
I mean, are we more scared now? Is there a fear factor that has been sitting in?
So that's a major controlling factor is fear. What is in your mind, what you saw on TV, what you saw on Instagram or TikTok, and someone was talking about the dangers of what's going on in society, or even get into politics. Politics is predicating like, oh, they're trying to take our gun rights. The institution, the world powers are trying to make us follow like the new world order, allegedly. And the thing is like by promoting that fear, I now my will has to succumb to get my sustenance. If I don't adhere to the fears in which people operate, then what happens?
You know what? It's interesting because my whole concept is with people with fear is how they attach to it. Right? Oh no, like they go to it. So when I'm thinking, let's say for instance, 2 million people just in one county, right? Let's say there's 2 million people in the county. Um, they all get together in a meeting and say, all right, ladies and gentlemen, let's put $1. Hell, let's just put 50 cents into a cap or a bucket, and we'll call it our bank.
Hmm.
Every day, we'll put 50 cents in our bank. Just 2 million people, 50 cents in the bank every day.
Right.
Could they not redistribute those funds to reassociate themselves in the community if
Very
they like?
easily. Very easily.
But like, no one's doing like. Could we even get 2 million? Say, for instance, if Russell Brand, I love his show's content. I'm just using him for
I
another
watch them
name.
too.
He has 5.45 million followers, right? So let's say, for instance, Russell wanted to create his own little delegation, his own little charter. He would ask, "Hey guys, 50 cents from each one of you. Can you guys just give me 50 cents?"
Times
And
that by a million, see what you got.
so the whole point is that we have the means at our disposal. We have the functionality. We have the capabilities to use our own free thinking of losing what we feel like is a control asset when really we are the controllers giving up the cables and giving up the cheat codes. So my thing is for everybody watching, if you think that is possible to alleviate the banks from their duties, alleviate the politicians from their lies and corruption, could you not see about connecting or bringing them the blank canvas, and we all have conversations on building communities that will establish communities? Could you do that? Now here's the next step. People have to be willing to share that. Be like, all right, yeah, I like the message.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Just swipe.
You're like,
Yeah,
what?
bro. Let me save that for later. You know what I'm saying? Let me just heart that and then be done with it. So it's like people have the capabilities of doing these things, but the convenience,
Ho,
knowing
ho,
that
ho,
it's
ho,
there,
ho.
it's like, fuck it. Yeah, I'll do it later. 2 days from now, it's okay. It'll still be there.
Or will it? The fear of will it? Now I notice in the alternative thinking spectrum, people are talking about food shortages. Now, the best example of fear in the beginning of when COVID happened in the months January, February, we started seeing what disappear: toilet paper. You couldn't find it. People went to Costco and they just hoarded like, pfft. And then the store said, "Oh, wait a minute. If we have no supply of toilet paper, what makes you think that they're not going to buy other goods in the store?" See, if you are depleted in one good, then
Yeah.
you've already created a liability against yourself. And
Mm.
by eliminating that supply of maybe that one thing, now determines, because people are more concentrated, they're worried about wiping their ass. Excuse my language. They're worried more about wiping their ass than feeding their gut. And so then after that disappeared, the cleaning supplies, we watched people lose their minds not being able to keep things sanitary. And then you hear a surge on YouTube of like how to create your own cleaning goods. People went to, okay, I got lemon, I got some bleach, or I got vinegar. And then those things started disappearing. And then last but not least, one thing that I noticed right away in those stores for 6 months was food supply. Beef skyrocketed, poultry skyrocketed, and those things started disappearing. So the trickle effect of that control factor of the mindset, if there
It's
is
a
a
business
lack,
game.
yeah, it's a
Business.
business game.
I
And
always
so
raise my steaks to $10, you know what I'm saying, a certain ounce, and then people would have to buy it because they're in fear of losing out. Almost like is that the Warren Buffett concept? Buy
right.
when people are in fear and sell when people are fat and hungry.
Now, look at the last 40 years of marketing when it comes to food and going out. Go to the place where you can get the biggest amount of food on your plate or to go, buy the biggest amount of combo meal. We started hearing, what size would you like to go? Medium? Super? Remember super size? Would you like to supersize that?
Oh shit! It
Would you
wasn't
like a
enough.
large? It went from a 12-ounce paper cup of a soft drink to 44 ounces. We're talking
Tall
literally
boys, man. Yeah.
almost a gallon. And there are people out there that buy, and I've been addicted to soda for a long time. And just recently I've been, just in the last 2 years, I've been working on that sugar to no, I'm working every day at it to drink more water. I suffer the consequences of all those gallons, my teeth, my gut, my heart, all that stuff is affecting my general health. And so when we look at that supersize mentality, more is better. Quality, you can compromise that a little bit. You know, when we look at how the market system works, it's very sinister because if people didn't have if people didn't have to work on, let's say, being mindful of what you purchase, mindful of what service you subscribe to. It was mentioned the other day, I overheard a comment someone was describing about how Disney is alleging that they were going to be more inclusive to certain communities. It's fine, but how does the narrative preach to children? And the big argument online is should we really be approaching children's gender identification and sexual orientation at early ages through film or cartoons? That's a major control, because that's putting into their mind, do I have to start judging about these things and my identity of how I play with another child? If I see a boy wearing a dress, how does that apply to a boy who's been taught, you don't boys don't wear dresses? So now you have a conflict of personalities, and when you look at those identities, should it be right? And there are some states here in the United States that are saying, like Florida, I think it's Governor DeSantis, he was proposing a bill where it's like, look, we do not want to encourage the conflict of trying to identify whether your gender or orientation too early. He struck that, he proposed as a bill, and it got a lot of attention in the last couple of weeks. And now you have the political debate, like the right versus the left. And we're not really understanding our own sovereignty. That's anti-American, it's
Hmm.
anti-choice, you name it, you have it. So when we look at the controlling factors of our choices and the decisions and rules that we follow by, that determines a lot of things. Because look at nowadays, there are so many laws made every single day, right? There are laws, and there are not. What baffles me is, why aren't there laws taken off the books? So at every blink and every corner you turn, you could be breaking the law in some other state by doing naturally what you do.
And it's hard to really gauge laws because there's an intensifying amount. How does one know what laws they need to be fluent in when they're doing something else and get caught up into it? It's like you never know. But the gist of it is you got to turn it into a life study. You got to be willing
True.
to do something on that account because who knows what the world's going to throw at you. Just last week, I had, like, honestly, me and my wife were going to sell this mixer that I currently am using right now. Could you imagine if I would have sold it for the 250 that the dude was asking for and just got rid of it versus what happened last Friday where my Roadcaster went kaput and went out on me. So I wouldn't be able to do a show. I wouldn't be able to handle.
Or you would just on your phone, and you couldn't
Oh,
add.
oh God! Oh, phone. This ain't 2018, bro. What you talking about?
What you're saying, we can't create on our phones? No show. Are
It's the
you the master of
convenience.
technology? It was just
I
no,
wish.
no. It's your conscious choice
Yeah,
not to do that, because
exactly.
your personal brand is, I want to put visual and audio excellence into what I do. And if I can't have all the equipment that I use to do exactly that, that controlling factor right there determines your performance.
Hmm.
And how many times have our signal, even today, our signal was interrupted briefly? That's fine. And we've learned to keep going and making steps forward, regardless of any technical interruptions. The show's still got to go on. And so, you have to think about how those controlling factors play into your ability to pivot. Look, this thing doesn't work out, I will find another way. I'm
Yeah.
not going to lose my mind. I'm not going to lose my mind over toilet paper.
What you mean the butt pillow? Oh man, come on.
I can't check my lipstick today? No, I
And
can't.
it's a beautiful thing, man. We have the chance to identify the things that control our lives.
Mhm.
I mean, at what age did you start doing this? Was this when you're in your 20s? Was this in your 20, 24, 25s?
I
No?
think the
Talk about it.
moment that my mom was trying to teach me self-sufficiency, like whether washing my own clothes or starting to cook meals for myself when she's not available, those were probably the earliest
Those are the
ingredients
pieces.
for. Think about it. Your parents they taught you to be responsible for yourself. And within their
Right.
household, if you didn't follow those rules to taking care of yourself, they had to stop what they're doing. And guess what? Fury may have come on your butt, or, you know, so there's lots of things that go into that. But I think the earliest ages is like we try to raise our children with a sense of responsibility. What is our end game goal of how we raise our children?
Right.
Um, Recently, my evaluation is basically I'm here to assist my children to becoming adults, good,
Well,
upstanding adults.
and that's the hardest thing because we have to look into peer pressure of society. We don't have that control. When that's one of the things my parents used to get at me about. Like they would worry that the things that I would do because the situations I got myself in. Like they have all these worryments that are placed on them outside of their control. It's not that they wanted it. It's just that that's what comes with the territory of being a parent or having a kid. And doing this, that whole overwhelmingness of with controls with something that you don't have control over, that is the most strongest, the most encouraging experience you can have, because when you see those faults and you see those troubles, it's how you respond to it. Not too many people are willing to analyze themselves. That's the biggest. You're the biggest critic. Like, why would I
Mhm,
take information from the worst critic I've ever had in my head, right? But then again, you when you do podcasting, like you listen to your voice, you
mhm.
listen out to how your cadences is. You want to feel the chemistry, the rhythm, and the craziest thing is, um, I'm really learning these new attributes. So if I'm willing to see what I'm doing wrong and I step my game up, only thing that's going to happen next is the end result of my success, and I keep pushing even with that. So for all of us today, if you're not looking into how the control factor of the food is and how much sleep you're getting or not getting, the homes you're living under, the vehicles you use as far as transportation, um, think about who controls all those mediums, and then
Nick,
when you know those controls, think about how it is that we can regain those similar controls so we can hold the sticks, so we can
did you
hold
ever
the
see
buttons.
the series Black Mirror on Netflix? And
Pieces, yeah, pieces of it.
there was one particular episode where they were showing where this girl, like everybody in society was grading each other by their phones, right? They like if you did a good job, and
Yeah.
the what happened was and it scared the living bejesus out of me. It scared me so much because it's already here. If you go into Yelp, you go into comments, you go into business, if someone complains, the cancel culture, people think like, oh, it's so cool, but it's cancel culture's always been here. It's
Hmm.
just to what extent people now have access to do it. Like they can do it secretly from their phone, go to a customer service link. Every time you have a printed receipt, say like you go to Chipotle or you go to McDonald's and you get a receipt, there is a website link for your customer convenience. And they will say, your experience rate a 1 star to 5 star, and you get that 1 star, you automatically get a series of questions that will say, well, what affected it, who was taking care of you, how did it taste, was it, tell us more, we want details.
But aren't those controls valid though? Doesn't that let people see
Right,
who we're dealing with?
but
Like,
because those streams are dangerous, you could falsely accuse people just because you're having a bad day. It's
I
so
mean,
easy
it's
to do that.
human nature though. But like with most days that you like, if you're in a relationship and you, like me and my lady, we have a lot of disagreements, right? So if there's a situation where, you know, I know that she really effed up and I got to be the man and like, I'm gonna take the L, but I'm not gonna take the L. I would literally tell her, it's like, you know what, it's all good, babe. And then on a sleep, go on the app, 2 stars, fucker. Like, you know what
Right.
I'm saying? Bing her. She's like, wait a minute. You gave me 2 stars? Oh, 1 star. Oh, you want to lower the ante? So it's kind of like you'll see the, the ill of your ways. Now, that could be a good thing, right? Like maybe it doesn't
Could be.
affect you with your business. Maybe it doesn't affect you with your personal life, but if it all ends up merging into one societal control factor, then that could ruin the way that courts see the household and how you raise your kids. Like they could literally come in and be like, all right, your relationship with this woman's at, 2.5 stars, and you need to be equivalent to stay in this relationship at a 4.7 or higher. And if not, we're gonna come in and take your kids away from you. Like what? Like what if that would be the case, simply off of altercation with in-home troubles that people know damn well that they shouldn't have the problems with. But if they start making situations like that merge into like a understanding factor or understanding for how relationships work. Like new data information sheets will come out with the consensus bureau. Like
Hmm.
this kind of relationship works at this percentage rate. These interracial couples work at this percentage rate. These couples who stay within their race, they work at a certain, and then they start breaking everybody down and dividing the statistics till we really figure out how they think. And then when we look at just the whole jargon I was just speaking on in a hypothetical standpoint, like would we be willing to let all these influences have say over how we interact with the woman, or go on a date with a woman,
And
if we
women are,
don't.
and what's interesting when you talk to a lot of the younger women, they really want women's empowerment. They literally say we don't need a man.
Mm,
But here's the question I always have to say: whoever asked you about your needing for a man? What about the get? You get to meet a man or a companion for that matter. How important is that to you? You get to do this, but by you trying to turn the tides, you also are part of the same problem,
right.
different packaging and delivering. So, when we look at these things and the implications of how people are connecting, it means so much more because now people are lying much more to each other about each other constantly. It's like if the optics aren't good and it doesn't look, I can't be a regular Joe guy, just stand up, good moral values. I have to add extra
Mm,
optics to the scene. And so what happens is when people find out, well, I thought you were this and you weren't that, you know, how do I trust you? Well, I want you to trust me. And this is something I've personally gone through is to establish trust after you've basically lied is probably the most difficult thing. And then you won't may not get a second chance. So they're making categorical changes and decisions based on what? The optics. If the optics don't sound the also the audio, what you're not
mm,
hearing, are you ignoring your own gut feeling? I've gaslit people. I've done that too. I've It's been done to me. And I've emotionally reacted to people. And now I'm in a different stage of myself saying, my awareness is probably the most useful tool I have.
mm-hmm,
Me to not commit to a certain behavior, not to change the way that I do things for others' convenience.
right.
My sacred self is probably the most important objective I have to achieve and begin that trust with me so that I now know I can be trusted no matter the circumstance because my word means something to me now. It significantly means, and as well as it would mean to you. So if you don't have to worry about telling the truth or what you said, you live a more freer life, right?
I wouldn't want that life.
Right, but people they go through it every day and they're like when I noticed on Clubhouse when it first started, everyone was a CEO, everyone was an entrepreneur, and you're like,
Mm,
"Yo, you just own a nail salon. How are you creating brand new streams of revenue with, you could be creating a chain, yeah, but
fake it
most of
till
them,
you make it, bro.
yeah, or LLCs." So here are the financial languages that are being promoted to people: LLCs, S corps. Now, if you really looked into the requirements that go into those things, and they're
I'm not
peddled
using them.
so much,
Yeah.
you don't need them. You want to escape, you cannot escape liability because you have an LLC. Believe it or not, legally, you will have responsibility as the
Some
main proprietor.
responsibility,
Yeah.
but not the full inheriting responsibility.
So
It alleviates some of that, but I get you.
yeah, so by creating these bonds, that's what they are. They're bonds of
Mm,
assurities that if you cause some damage, there will be some ability to be able to recompensate somebody who may have suffered damages. So these are the new lawsuits that are coming into play in our court systems, that where people are now having to decide, well, I relayed in this product, I relayed on this personality, it was a fraud, I got sick, or maybe they went through a cosmetic surgery that
Mm,
scarred and harmed them for life, you know? So we now have to, and then the financial advice. Now, in order to be an accountant, you have to be licensed. You have to take an
right,
exam, right?
right.
That's the first financial advisor, you know, and then we've got what's called fiduciary duty advisors. And these people, fiduciary basically means that they don't gain any profit from you. A true fiduciary doesn't gain any profit from you. He really doesn't. They're
Wait,
doing it.
wait. Say that one time. What is a fiduciary's duty?
A fiduciary
I'm
a
sorry.
fiduciary duty advisor's duty is basically saying, and I sense a tongue twister, but they're not supposed to try to sell you a stock and then they gain and you lose.
So
There
they're
are
supposed to be a
regulation,
middleman with no incentives.
right? And if you notice in the last 20 years, you've seen now credit advisors. Now this is a controlling factor. Your credit determines your lendability and buyer's ability. But people are getting wiser. Like, why do I need to borrow to live? You know, I don't need to borrow as much. I don't need to do payday loans. I don't need to get major credit cards because that's not my money. That's somebody else's with percent. So by borrowing with credit cards and loans, you're, are you thinking about the next 10 to 15 years of what's going to cost you extra to pay that back? No, you're going
Mm,
to start the process of reborrowing, and
mm, yeah.
it's recycled. So
I
are
mean,
you really
that's what
living?
people are comfortable with, though, because it's something that's been passed on and taught. So now you have this rhetoric being spread through the generational curses. Like, remember we talked about the generational curses before. So we have, like, for me, I break that curse. I have my kids now. They'll be like, "Hey, Daddy, should I get a loan?" No, let's work it out. We got this amount of money coming
And if
in.
you say cash is king, is that really relevant anymore?
Bruh, the way that I walked into so many stores at the past weekend, they wouldn't take cash. They were only taking card. Like, we had a slew of cash on us because we didn't want to use our cards when we're away. Nope. Here it is. Because you know all the frauds. You lift up the sliding machine. Some of them are hacks now. A lot of people are doing that, trying to steal your credit card information and just run with it. So we decided to go out on this last weekend. Me and my wife went out and use cash. But nah, these companies were like, "Sorry, we don't take that." That's a control factor. It's like, wait a minute, if I want to
If
use
you
cash, I
can't
can't.
exchange cash, that means the access to your card, there's no conscious restrictions because it's just so easy to tap, swipe,
I mean, there is
insert.
restrictions. There's control over how your card
Right.
gets
So if
some
I
amount of
don't have to,
funds.
yeah, and if I can't, like I thought about this, if I were to take my money out of the banks, if everyone took all their money and held it themselves, right? What do you think that would do to the financial institutions? Do you think that they would have their lending power? Nope.
I mean, they
Because
would, but would people be going to
no,
it?
if you like, if you had, I mean, just recently in the last, say, like 30 years, I remember all my paychecks were direct deposit. They would not issue paper checks. And I asked, when I was working for Macaroni Grill, I asked him, when I was a waiter, I said, "Hey, why won't you give me a paper check? I'd prefer that." And the reason why at the time I was I had bad credit. I had some liens against my bank account. Every time I deposit, they took it all. So I'm like, no,
Mm,
I can't have that. And so I had to resort to pay cards that took a percentage every time I wanted to use my money. They
damn,
took, was it a
damn,
7 to 12%?
that's the control, bro.
Yeah. So that's not fair to us, you
No,
know? And have you noticed the change? Depletion, like if you do find a place that does take cash, they will say, "We are on a change shortage. Please either try to round up." So that's also forcing people to say, "Oh, keep the change." So if whether 13 cents or 75 cents, well, we don't have enough coin on us because we can't give you back. Well, then tell you what, give me a price reduction where you can.
so now we got to be finicky with our money now. That's crazy.
You know, this is not by accident. This is creating revenue streams of the extra. Now, if you imagine a hedge fund that if it took a percentage of 12 cents for every trade that it manages, or transaction. We've seen the guy, the Wolf of Wall Street. He went to prison for this. He went to prison. He took a percentage of coins. I remember reading about him. He took a percentage of those trades, became a multi-millionaire, and
Mm.
then the FCC, I think it was the FCC, they caught on, and then the FBI caught on to what he was doing, and they put him. And then he served his time. Guess what? He's back out now. He sells his time to holding conventions, to giving people how he cheated the system. You know, how the banks are robbing you. How many times do you hear that people are trying to sell you a program? This is how the banks are robbing you. This is how the loaning institution. You need to get into life insurance. Don't put your money in a bank. The banks bank with life insurances. You know, if no one read and saw what happened in 2008 when the great fall, the real estate bust, so to
Right.
speak, if no one, okay, more people had interest only loans in their homes. We know that people that didn't qualify normally for a home did, based on, because if the interest was low, hey, it's easy. If only
They
paying
could get as
three.
much money as they could from them.
But when Fannie Mae and the Lehman Brothers went under, and they're like, "Yo, our check is being called. We don't have the money. We don't have the holdings." Our insurance company went bankrupt. It caused such an escalating financial fall that people lost their homes and their jobs and their cars. Things were like, people were kicked out. And it took a few years people to recover. And they're still not recovered to this day.
Mm.
You know,
That's a different game, man. You're talking about willingness to get into something all because of you knew, hey, I'm a growing family. I have a responsibility to take care of the livelihood. And now it's really set forward for not only my future generation, but maybe I can set up roots here. So now we having this whole questionable point of view towards these institutions, and I think it is time that we realize that is the controlling issue. People need to wake up, gain control, and if they are willing to gain control, what are they willing to gain control of?
I
But
think we've talked about this before, but really it's recognizing, before you get leverage and blame them, let's start looking at ourselves. What are we being educated with? And what are the clear points of your controlling factors? What are you willing to live with? If I eat better, guess what? And I have better rest, I now can consciously decide where my attention goes and where I'm leveraged. If I can stop drifting on the external things, then guess what? I now have my own personal peace. I
mm,
live with myself better. So we can't blame those institutions. They're just doing what we've already had in place, and they just made the convenience easy, and they used all of us against ourselves. And we can't get mad at them, because if I were that CEO, or if I'm owning that whatever, the deep state, if I was in charge of it, what would I do to rule the world?
mm, it's
You're
time for
creating.
us to do that, though. It's time for us.
Yeah.
Our time is now. You,
Yeah.
you and me. Our time is now.
Right.
Regardless of anybody, if they watch when they watch this show and they be like, they had a lot of good points, and just scroll on. We're not taking what we've been
Or
putting
we
down.
should protest, and like we should go put, and then guess what
Yeah.
happens? Like everything, if you didn't watch what happened, like, for example, and closing my points with George Floyd, when all those protests happened, that was during COVID. No one was concerned about their health. Not one person out protesting. If it were that serious, like it was being promoted and over on TV, I can't go here. I can't go shopping. I can't enjoy myself. And not only that, I am pissed about what some police officers, how they killed a man, and I'm willing to go fight people I don't even know, kill people, and lose my damn mind. And then we got to protest, and then if things calm down, and then another tragedy happens, charges people right back up, gets you off your purpose. And what are you doing? What are you doing? Are you really using your voice effectively? Your presence, your dollar, your control factors for your purpose and not theirs. That's what my ending point would like to be.
You know, as the days grow, regardless of how we wake up in the morning and get to our business and then take care of our family, regardless of those institutions that's been set and laid out for us. It is time for us to really take responsibility what we do afterwards. So my final thought for those who are with us today, really assess the situations you're in, how much money's coming out, where you want to be in 20 years, 10 years. Because honestly, if you're not thinking futuristically, regardless of how you see it today, then that's on you. But for people that are willing to think like that, you are taking back the control the best way you can. So with that, take back the control.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, make sure that you tune in this Saturday. What is it? 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. I believe it
At
is
11:30
a,
Eastern
a,
time.
or yeah, 8:30 a.m. Pacific Standard, 11:30 Eastern, 10:30 Mountain Central. Make sure that you tune in Blank Canvas with our other co-host, Cyber Shots. We'll be coming to you live. Share with a friend. Make sure you subscribe and like. If you want details, I'll be posting details in this YouTube posted here on mine, as well as Blank Canvas. And follow on any of the streams possible that you can that's available to you. Thank you all for those who've made comments. That's Geo. It's Lulu. Thank you so much for coming out. We definitely appreciate you coming out. So make sure that you tune in this Saturday with Blank Canvas, and we'll let you know the details of that show coming up. I'm 72 the Architect,
And I'm Mr. No Show.
and we'll Blank Canvas. We'll see you all next time, ladies and gentlemen.